All right, welcome to VMware Explore Barcelona, day 2. Man, so many great announcements, and certainly one of those was VMware Private AI, some enhancements there as well. We're going to be talking to some experts, John. Do you recognize these guys?
You know, every time, I think if you say the word AI 3 times, I think at least one of these two gentlemen appears.
Yeah.
Like a genie.
Yeah. Yeah, joining, virtually speaking, is certainly family, not even friend, family of the podcast, our good friend, Frank Denneman. Frank, welcome back.
Nice to be here again.
All right, and Justin, who's basically becoming a regular. We've had him on the VCF video series. You may recognize him. We did a good deep dive on private AI there, and now he's here joining us live here in Barcelona. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thank you for having me. Great to be here.
Yeah, so VMware Private AI, everybody heard about it last year. Now we're hearing about it this year. I'm really curious, before we dive into some of the details, how's the adoption going?
We're in the adoption cycle. Customers are taking it seriously. They love the message. They love using their private data to help out a model. Half a dozen customers are deploying it today. I had a customer here at the show yesterday saying, we've already done RAG, we've already done private AI on VMware. I didn't even know about them before.
Oh, wow.
So there are a lot of people out there in the field now talking to their customers about private AI, and we're educating more and more of our field people saying, have this conversation with your customer. There's a great opportunity here to get this new type of application built.
So if I'm an IT infrastructure, more traditional VMware admin, and I'm looking for who internally would be the most interested, internally with the business on this AI project, Who would that be?
It would be an application architect or a data scientist who's looking to build an internal chatbot, backroom chatbot, to help out the customer service representatives of their company answer questions better. That type of application. Or it could be an application architect who's building a code generator to help their developers write new code. That's what we're doing internally with it at VMware.
Right.
That's interesting, because on code generation, I would have thought that was a more like generalized by language, but there's very specific practices, very specific applications, like training that down further on the specific applications and the unique documentation or structures that...
Yeah. If you take ourselves as an example here, John, we took some of the top kernel engineers, took their code in C, C++, and
okay, so no awful scripts from me, thank goodness. Left my GitHub alone.
Fine-tuned an existing model. Took an existing model from Llama and fine-tuned it with our own source code, private data. We don't show that to everybody, right? And now there's 300 engineers using that trained model to generate new Power CLI code, new C++ code, to generate code for product.
Right, and this is retrieval augmented generation, RAG?
Well, that particular usage may not have used RAG, but the example I gave you earlier of the chatbot to help a customer service representative would be the first application we would build using RAG.
Okay, so walk me through that, what that would look like.
So in RAG, what you're doing is using a database that is separate from the large language model, but that database contains your private data in a special form called embeddings form. These are rows of numbers representing each word and the meanings of each word. And that data has been preloaded into the vector database, and there's a whole bunch of techniques that Frank has described in his new blog about loading that data in to the database. And then at query time, instead of the query going directly to the large language model, it's first routed to a database, and the query is, do you have any documents that you know about that look like this question, that have any similarity to this question? Oh, yes, I have. I've got 4 KBs here that talk about vSphere 9.0, not public yet, private. And those 4 documents are now fed to the large language model, which summarizes them, processes them, makes them easy to understand in short order.
Provides context, or uses the context from what
gives the answer to the field person who's been asked the question.
It seems like it's like almost too good to be true. It's like magic.
Well, that's the starter application that has the most bang for the buck in private AI. A backroom chatbot, not even publicly visible, but available to my own employees to make them better at answering questions.
Yeah, sure.
Internally, we use private AI to summarize PDF documents. There's 20 or 30 PDF documents about DRS. I want a summary of what DRS has for GPUs.
Right.
we're hosting that application internally ourselves.
I like that. So Frank, I know you talk to customers all the time. You've been deeply involved in VMware Private AI Foundation, especially with NVIDIA. What are some of the other use cases that you hear people talking about?
Well, Justin already said code assistance. Code assistance is very big. The other one is talking to your private data, like what we already discussed about using your own knowledge base, building your own knowledge base, and you can do it with everything you want when it's private, right? So for us, source code, we are not going to upload that to Google. We're not going to upload that to AWS. We want to include that internally. But also Confluence pages. We want to engage with Confluence. Everybody knows who's used Confluence.
Right.
The moment you see it, you have to bookmark it because you won't ever see
You'll
it again.
never find it
right?
again.
It's
Exactly.
so true.
Yeah. With
That
this,
perfect query of search that found it, you'll never recreate.
Never. Like every planet aligns at that point in time. With an internal chatbot, we immediately have the ability to just ask the knowledge base, hey, I've got this question. Can you give me back the answers? Now, one of the most, I think, interesting use cases, what I saw with a financial institution, was they built a chatbot, not externally facing, but internal facing.
Right.
So whenever you call their call center, you typically get a overstressed person who needs to navigate through multiple screens, multiple applications per screen to figure out what you're talking about. So you typically get a disengaged person because they're dealing with the
Well,
system.
it's really annoying because you just entered your account number already, and then they ask you for it anyways.
Exactly. So what they did, they said, let's incorporate all our internal knowledge inside the RAG database, inside the knowledge base of a RAG system, and we allow the call center agent to basically ask the same question to the chatbot, and we immediately get back not only the answer, but also the citation. Like, I'm getting this information from that particular source, because that's typically what we have with LLMs and with chatbots, the hallucination factor. Right?
Oh, and when they do cite sources, they've made them up or they attach random unrelated
They don't even give you the
documents. Like,
sources. You don't even get them.
Yeah.
Same as we go and Google our own stuff. If I ask for VCF, I will bet you my first hit on Google is VCF 3. Like, totally not applicable to my use case at this point in time, right? But with RAG and with the citation aspect of things, I see the answer and I can already validate that this answer is actually the one that I'm looking for, but also I can click through. I can actually grab that document.
see the metadata, but further validate.
Exactly, right? And so the next step, of course, for that customer is to do what's called multimodal. Multimodal means we're using different types of information. That can be text, that can be voice, that can be video, whatever. So the next version for them is, I'm going to transcribe that voice question, the question that the customer is asking, and I'm going to put it into text, and I'm automatically going to search for it. So the call agent doesn't even have to type anymore. He basically, or she, gets the answer right in front of their faces. And here's the thing, they can interact from person to person. They have more time dealing with the customer in a more human way. And I think that's key. We all called the bank.
Oh, absolutely.
And you try to game the system to get to that
Mash
human,
zero repeatedly.
right?
Customer service.
Right? And so this is the next level. Like, I'm getting a person who's completely engaged with me while they're getting the most accurate data.
I love it.
This is interesting because this isn't about, and I like the banking analogy here, because this isn't about necessarily replacing a person with a chatbot.
Never.
It's
Never.
enhancing the person. This reminds me of the whole story about ATMs and how, ATMs are supposed to replace tellers, and there's technically more tellers in the world today than I think there ever were.
Yeah.
They
with
just do more valuable things. They're more efficient, and they have more context.
Yeah,
And-
with AI, you don't lose your job to AI. You lose to a person who uses AI.
Right.
Right?
Right.
So I want to talk a little bit about model governance. Now, I know there's a lot of different models out there. I'm assuming most people go to Hugging Face. That's like the GitHub, if you will, of models. Is there a certain model that's better to use with VMware Cloud Foundation or VMware Private AI Foundation, or how do you handle which model to use?
We think of ourselves as an agnostic platform to any model. So a customer asked me this morning, can I use my own model? Certainly you can. The model governance step is really a QA of step of the model, where if you're downloading the newest model from Hugging Face or from NVIDIA or from anywhere else, you should really do your own private QA on it. And we have a mechanism for doing that where the model comes down into a deep learning VM. We call it an AI workstation. And you run tools against it like GIScard and other tools to check whether it's hallucinating, to check whether it has bias, to check whether the right guardrails of what kind of response it should give to certain questions.
Interesting. So you can have a pre-built list of questions that are tied to the regulatory environments that you face.
And guess what? Those models are generated by, or those questions are generated by yet another model.
It's kind of like Inception, I think,
yeah,
a little bit.
Almost.
Yeah, so a recent example I saw this built by Sean Huntley inside VMware was using a GPT-4 model, OpenAI, to fire questions at my private model and check its hallucinations.
So you don't have to leave the data, but you can still use it to validate.
Generate a report on how good quality. It actually found some problems with, answering questions it shouldn't have been answering to do with weapons, etc. And this was a QA that you should do of any model that you adopt, and it differentiates the not so good models from the very good models.
Okay, I can make sure when I ask vMotion questions, I don't get ITAR violations back. So.
Yeah. And if you find that your model, it passes the tests, basically, you promote that model up into a repository supported by Harbor, same as containers.
Oh, so it's kind of like what Harbor was doing for making sure my containers don't have weird backdoors.
This is doing the same for models.
Making sure my models aren't going to hallucinate and have insane results.
We call this model governance as a general theme.
So what Justin is saying is you use your DLVM, your deep learning virtual machine, as like a clean room. You download it there, you do all your heuristic scannings, you do your malware scanning, like what Justin said, and you make sure that this model is safe to use within the enterprise, within your organization. That's the moment when you, like Justin said, upload it to the model store. And so you can then safely distribute it to your data science teams or to your program, to your programmers. But the other thing that we do, which is interesting, what we're not saying, this is the particular model that you want to run with us, but we do it the other way around. Together with NVIDIA, we've built what's called a NIM. So it's their proprietary solution, but we are heavily invested in it. We basically do a lot of testing for them. The moment you want to deploy a particular model, we basically deploy a microservice. And that microservice is completely aligned to the needs of that model. But not only that, it understands which GPU or GPUs you actually attach to the Kubernetes workload or to the deep learning virtual machine. Because we know which model, like GPU model, we not large language model, GPU model.
What the parameter requirements are.
So we know, do you have, what type of GPU do you have? How many do you have? What is your policy? We have a latency policy or a throughput policy and a precision. Like precision is the number, the floating point number. The longer, the higher the number, more numbers to use. It's better, it's accurate, but it's slower because you have to crunch more math in this particular case. And based off that sequence, the NIM actually downloads a updated or optimized large language model or an embedding model, whatever, into the NIM. And so what we've seen is a 2 to 8x improvement just by aligning it, that model, that optimized model, to the infrastructure. So we have the DLVM completely decked out with all the tools you need in order to quickly run a experiment. And we have the NIM that basically does the rest. And that better together story is amazing.
I like here as the person who's trying to run the model, I don't have to become an expert on model sizes and GPUs and what else is running on that cluster that I'm, whole filling around. Like that is, it reminds me of people who didn't use DRS back in the day and like vMotion by hand and had spreadsheets. People are having to do the same thing with cards that cost $20,000.
Well, that's the thing, right? So you have a card of $20,000. What is the last thing you want to do? Have it in your data center after waiting for 52 weeks on it,
right?
And not doing anything, right? And so we've built this platform where you can actually easily deploy such a thing like a DLVM or an AI Kubernetes cluster, and instantly have action. You can instantly run your model. You can instantly do your experimentation. But the best thing is the data scientist doesn't have to do a lot of things. So they don't have that time invested. Because one of the things, and I was talking to Justin about this, if you have a VM and you get a GPU attached to it and you need to figure out all the libraries and they are very brittle, that stack is insanely brittle from a software perspective, and you have to figure out what works, what is the last thing you're going to do? You're not going to give it back, right? You're going to say, this one is mine.
This is mine.
And I'll keep it forever, right? It's like the machine under your desk. But with the DLVM and with the Kubernetes cluster, you know it's ready to go. It's there for you. You just have to go to your self-service portal, do your experiment, save the data on a persistent volume, and basically give it back. Because next time you want to do something, you can do it. You don't have the stress of somebody breathing down your neck. Hey, you're idling a GPU.
This reminds me of people who used to build like reference architectures and were doing performance benchmarking. They would be very prescriptive, of the whole cluster they'd set up. They'd have the hardware. They'd tune it for their application, their run through, and they wouldn't let anyone near that cluster. And they would lock up a cluster for months potentially, where they were tuning and adjusting. This is the same way, but with even more expensive resources.
And that's just not possible with the price of these devices. Yeah. Everybody wants to get at them, and so this is a really intelligent way to do that management.
And you get repeatability as well. If you need to do that same experiment with a different model, you have the DLVM conditions that you had for the first test. Repeatability is important here because there's lots of experiments going on.
It's probably one of the most fascinating topics that I've seen come from VMware in a really long time. It's very exciting. It's very innovative. This is the type of VMware innovation that I love to see. And we've got some great partners that we work together, like you said, with NVIDIA. I'd love to leave with your guys. I know you're doing sessions, so tell me the session, and everybody should just obviously look for Justin or Frank on the content catalog and watch those sessions, absolutely, if you haven't already. But what is the session that you guys are talking about? Where can people learn more about this?
So we have a joint session tomorrow. It's unlocking your data, a deep dive into RAG, and that goes into great detail about how to construct, how to look at a RAG system. There are lots of best practices now and sizing guides for that particular application. And I have a What's New with Private AI with Ala Dewberry as well, who's a product manager. We have an NVIDIA speaker in that. That's really the new features for ML operations, like model governance that we were talking about, and other features coming as well.
So I want to talk something about that session with Justin. So I saw Justin at Vegas doing this tremendous workshop, 90 minutes long, captivating the whole crowd for 90 minutes long on a Thursday morning. That's something special.
Last day of the show.
What he did was he started out with baseline. Like, let's get from the ground floor up to the most interesting stuff. And by doing so, the administrators in the room finally understood, like, what are we talking about? What are the things that everybody, when you talk about RAG and you talk about embedding models, what's that? And
it's a lot of acronyms, yeah.
Really. And so he did this amazing job. So I thought for Barcelona, let's incorporate that into the RAG deep dive. So yes, it's a RAG deep dive. So yes, we go into real depth, but we start at the ground floor. So through the lens of a VI admin, on making AI understandable, right? That's the one. So for everybody, please go to that session or watch the recording because it's really going to be great.
It's 10 a.m. tomorrow. I think it's 1804. 1804.
That sounds right.
Yeah.
That'll work.
And the other session that I have is actually one to run AI without GPUs. Run AI on CPUs with Will Rodbert. So that's a very interesting topic as well.
Yeah, that is another interesting topic, and we should have a whole conversation on that one as well. Gentlemen, I know we're out of time. I want to thank you so much for joining us on Virtually Speaking, and enjoy the rest of your Explore.
Thank you
for having us.
Thank you, John.
All right.